Hi, everybody. I want to thank you and I want to welcome you to the 2020 Indiana Black Expo Hiring Hoosiers webinar. Thanks for being here with us, called Preparing for Job Interviews in the Virtual Environment. Again, this is the 2020 Indiana Black Expo Hiring Hoosiers webinar, Preparing for Job Interviews in the Virtual Environment. My name is Mark Mullins. I'm a news anchor with WRTV, and I will be your host this afternoon's session, and I want to be the first to welcome you in and taking part in this very important bridge to landing that job. Indiana Black Expo is celebrating 50 years as an organization, and for 50 years, IBE has provided technical support, resources, and training opportunities, job opportunities as well for our community. And this work would not be possible without the support and generous sponsorship of the sponsors who really get behind this effort. So please help me in thanking our Employment Opportunity Fair sponsors: WRTV Hiring Hoosiers, FedEx, Carrier, Delta, Fawcett, Ivy Tech, and Northwest Bank. We'd also like to thank our Employment Opportunity Fair partners, including the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, the Indiana Department of Workforce Development, and the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. We thank them for making all of this possible. So before we start here, I do have a few housekeeping rules that I do need to go over for us. First, if you have a question, just please type that in the Q&A box. You see that at the bottom of the screen there. Again, if you have a question, type it down in the Q&A box, and we will answer as many questions as possible before our session ends. And then also toward the end of this session, and this is key, this is very important, there will be a link in the session to the survey there in the chat box. We do appreciate if you fill out that survey. Let us know if this was helpful for you or ways that we could improve it in the future. At this time, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Ms. Erica Johnson. Ms. Erica Johnson is the Senior Human Resources Generalist for the New and Recon Parts Organization with Cummins, Inc. Erica has been with Cummins, Inc. for over 6 years and has more than 12 years experience in human resources. She has worked in human resources roles supporting various industries, including manufacturing, finance, customer service, and alternative energy. Erica, welcome into our webinar, helping people get their resumes ready there. We really appreciate you being here today.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate that introduction. And welcome again to today's session, Preparing for Job Interviews in the Virtual Environment. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all today so that we can go ahead and get started. All right, well, again, welcome everyone to the session. And again, I am so grateful to be a part of the IBE this year. I do appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'm honored to have received the invitation to speak to you about resume building and interviewing skills that ties right into our Preparing for Job Interviews in the Virtual Environment series. As you all are looking at the image on the screen, this is an image of my actual LinkedIn page and a snippet of my resume. And you are engaging in an activity that employers do every day. You're checking out my credentials. You might even be trying to determine if I'm qualified to speak to you about the subject of resume building. And some of you have already made inferences based on just the small amount of information on the screen that you see. In just a short time, have you learned anything about me? I'm pretty sure that you have, because I know that LinkedIn is very informative. And so as you all are looking on the screen, you probably have picked up that I am in human resources, as Mark mentioned earlier, and I am a part of Cummins. I've had a very unique career involving a number of different companies and positions at different levels. Because of my experience, I've been able to better understand a diverse workforce. And I've been the entry-level person, I've been the mid-level manager, I've been the person that's recently been laid off, I've been the last person to close a site. And so because of my extensive experience in all these different areas, I definitely like to take that information and share it with you so that I can help you as well. All right, so my goal today is to help you build a resume to use whether you are looking for a new job or you're sprucing up your resume for an internal opportunity with your current employer. So let's take a look at what's on the agenda today. So we're going to talk about your resume, which should be an engaging summary. When someone looks at your resume, they should be tuning in right away. It should grab someone's attention. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. The body of your resume should be the proof of your expertise. And then we're going to talk about your relevant experience in education. We'll talk about your resume, which is the foundation of the interview process. And then I'm going to share some resources with you. And of course, there'll be some time for Q&A. All right, so let's talk about your resume. Why all the fuss? Why all the fuss? Well, let's think about your resume. Your resume is your personal billboard. When you think about a billboard that you see when you're driving down the road, it only takes about 3 seconds to check out what's being advertised. While that isn't much time, advertisers count on the fact that they are good at grabbing your attention. The better they advertise, the more likely you will remember their product, and eventually you want to purchase their product. Those advertisements need to make a statement, and we had better understand the product being offered when we see that billboard as consumers, right? We need to understand what that product does, what need it meets, and what problem it solves. And if we don't, we most likely will not even remember that advertisement. So hiring managers and most employers don't have a ton of time. So therefore, they have to see something that wows them, something that lets them know you have a product that can meet their need. So many times today, when we look for jobs, we think about what is this job going to do for me? And we miss the point that employers are looking for someone that can meet their needs. What organizational needs can we meet? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as we think about why all the fuss about a resume, well, we need to have a good resume before we even think about the interview process. So a resume is a medium for advertising yourself. It's the best possible chance of getting a hiring manager's attention. You have to make a good first impression. It's a quick way to give that hiring manager an idea as to what you can do. They want to see action. And so when we talk about resumes in just a moment, we'll talk about using action words. They want to know what you can accomplish for them. A single mistake can represent years of hard work. So let's talk about that a little bit. Many of you have had job experiences before. You've worked for several different employers, or maybe some of you are new to the workforce. Either way, know that your resume is that first impression. So you don't want a single mistake, a typo, an error on your resume to knock you out of the running when you have the skills and abilities to do the job. So certainly take time with your resume and make sure it is the best possible representation of you. All right, and know that there are multiple candidates applying for the same position. We know that it is competitive in the workplace. So we certainly want to make sure that we understand that there are others that are competing for this one slot. So it's that important to give your full attention to your resume. All right. So as you look on the screen here, this is just a standard resume. And many of you are familiar with this type of format. And we'll talk about formatting in just a moment. But as you look at Mike Likes' resume, looks pretty standard. You know, you can see he has some job experience and everything. You know, doesn't really grab your attention or anything, but it has the needed information. So what can Mike do to spruce up his resume and to grab that employer's attention? When you think about an employer, and just as we talked about, you're going to have some competition. So what can Mike do to visually pull his resume to the top of the pile? Great formatting can strengthen any resume. So as you're looking at this, I'm sure that you would agree that Mike Likes' resume now as you look at it on the right side of the screen, looks more appealing simply because it's been reformatted. As simple as that. Now, of course, Mike has to have the experience and he has to be able to clearly articulate what it is that he's accomplished. But he's done the first step in just making that advertisement of himself stand out just a little bit more. All right, so let's talk about the body of your resume, which is where you're going to put the proof of your expertise. The first thing we're going to talk about are the types of resumes. And so there are 4 general types of resumes that you'll see in the marketplace today. So you'll see a chronological resume, a functional resume, a combination resume, or a targeted resume. And what we want to focus on today is that chronological resume, which lists your experiences along a timeline, and it's the most common and easy to read. So most employers are going to be looking for a chronological resume. And so that's the one that you've probably seen the most of. And so again, it's the most common and easy to read. And of course, again, if you have an employer who is looking at a stack of resumes, this one is going to allow them to be able to visually see the time that has passed as you've worked through your experiences. And it's also going to really highlight those experiences that they want to see. And so chronological resume is the type of resume we're going to focus on today. All right, so let's talk about a summary of qualifications. Again, in the spirit of thinking about the experience that employer is having as they're looking at these resumes, you want to be able to have a way for them to clearly see your skills and abilities right at the beginning of their experience looking at your resume. So a summary of qualifications is a more powerful marketing tool that can highlight your most impressive skills and experiences. Okay. All right, so as most employers today are going to be using some type of electronic system to source through resumes, this is going to be key. You certainly want to remember this because this is really going to help you as you think about the way you apply for jobs going forward. A summary has certain skills and abilities listed in there with specific words. And you want those words to be able to be pulled out when those employers are using that electronic system to source. And so that summary can go at the very top of your resume, and that employer can read really quickly what it is that you can do. And it's going to entice them to read the rest of your resume. It's almost like a mini cover letter. And so you have many times where employers may not even ask for a cover letter, but this summary of qualifications can serve that purpose. As you know, a cover letter generally has your skills and abilities listed in a summarized format. But this summary of qualifications can go directly on the top of your resume and do the same thing. You only want to include relevant skills and experiences, and you want to avoid personal pronouns. You want to be clear and concise, and you certainly want to be honest. You don't want to fabricate, you don't want to exaggerate, because you do know that you do have an interview, and when that happens, you want to be able to speak intelligently to anything that you have on that resume. So you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. So don't put yourself in a position where you're not being honest about what you can do. Here's another example of summary of qualifications. This is more so in the format of bullet points, which you can do as well if you don't prefer to do a paragraph. If you prefer to do bullet points, you are more than welcome to do that. It can be used in a place of a standalone objective statement as you look at the bullet points there. And normally it's about 3 to 5 bullet points versus a short paragraph. All right, so let's talk about your relevant experience and your education. This is where we're really going to get into some of the things that we have to do in order to make sure that we are showing that employer that we can meet the needs of their organization. So here you have on the screen just a standard resume. And this person has their summary of qualifications listed at the top. This is Natalie Wells' resume. And so she's got some relevant experience there. She's got some development there, some education as well that's listed. And so As all of us have different work experiences, we know that our resumes are going to look very different. However, we can all use these types of tips that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. You can use a common way to highlight your skills and experiences on your resume. 1 to 2 pages is normally the limit unless you are in a specialized field such as engineering. And even then, you only want to include your relevant experience. So as you can see here, Natalie only has 1 page for her resume, which is pretty standard. 3 major factors to consider when you're updating or creating a resume are the job description, your relevant work experience, and then also your transferable skills. And so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But we definitely want to focus on those transferable skills and competencies as we talk about getting into the workforce. So let's talk about the job description first. So now we have a standard job description that is on the screen. And so Natalie has a customer service background. And so there are certain things in Natalie's resume that highlight her customer service skills. And so the job that she's applying for is that contact center agent. And so if you read through that job description, if you can see it there, it does highlight some of the things that that organization is looking for in terms of a customer service agent. And so there are things on Natalie's resume that actually resonate with what's in that contact center agent's job description. And so if I were to compare the two, I do see that there are some similar things that are there. So if I look at Natalie's resume, she has a few things. So respond to telephone inquiries, providing quality services to customers and associates, inquiring about the availability of products or status of orders. She also has that she strives for quick complaint resolution. She's been commended by her supervisor for the ability to resolve problems on the first call and avoid escalation of issues. And she's also memorized the company's product offerings. So I think we could all look at this and agree and say, you know, Natalie has some really good customer service experience. Don't see an issue there. But what is Natalie going to be able to do to get that hiring manager to see that her skills and abilities actually match up to that job description and what the needs of that organization are? What can she do? She can simply take her resume and just reword some of the information that is on it. So first of all, what that does is if that employer is using an electronic system to source for specific words, it will grab Natalie's resume. In addition to that, when that hiring manager is taking a look at her resume, those words that are on her resume will resonate with them because that's the language of that organization. For my company that I work for, we have a specific language that we use, and I know it well. And so it is helpful when even I'm applying for roles to know what that language is, what our core values are, the things that are important to us, the needs that I'm trying to meet of the organization. And so if Natalie just took the first 3 bullet points that we have at the top there, and she just changed the wording to provide prompt assistance to customers, to resolve customer issues, that she understood the company's product offerings. Simply changing the words in her resume will give her a more likely chance of her resume being pulled electronically, as well as that hiring manager reviewing her resume and seeing that she understands the language of that organization. She's done her homework and she cares about being able to meet the needs of that organization. All right, so now that you all have been able to take a look at some things that you can do with your resume in terms of helping it to stand out more with employers, let's talk about your experience. This is where you're going to showcase your most relevant experience, whether it's past or present. And as we talked about earlier, you also want to be able to show your transferable skills. And for just a moment, let's talk about transferable skills. So if I was in a role previously and I want to maybe go into a new career as I'm thinking about the workforce and how things are changing and COVID-19 and everything that's happening in the world today, what can I do if I feel like I need to make a career change? So I'll just give you all an example of transferable skills and how they can be used. Prior to me joining human resources or me going into the human resources field, I actually was in church administration for a nonprofit organization. I did that for several years, but I wanted to transition into human resources. Well, what transferable skills would I have to be able to do that? Well, I have to be able to know how to be organized when it comes to church administration. I also have to keep confidentiality, and I definitely need to know how to work with all different types of personalities. And so because of those transferable skills that I had working for that nonprofit organization, I could clearly articulate to an employer that I can do human resources as well, where those skills are also needed. And so I want you to be thinking about all the past experiences that you've had as well, where you're thinking that maybe if I ran a lawnmower service, that those are skills that I don't necessarily need when I get into marketing. But of course, that's a business. If you ran a lawnmower service, you can have transferable skills that can go into marketing. You can think about sales. You can think about customer service. And so the point I want to make here is that you don't want to cut yourself short thinking that your past experiences and even your present experiences are not relevant, even when you're considering doing a career change, okay? So when you're thinking about the experience that you want to put on your resume as we go through the experience section, be thinking about your transferable skills and competencies as well. So some tips, again, just thinking about the way that your resume is formatted. You want to use black type or white or ivory paper if you're doing hard copies. And again, this is just, these are my preferences, but again, we have resume builder resources that are available where they use color, they use other formats, and you are certainly welcome to do that in terms of what the industry standards are today. So I don't want you to feel like this is the only way that you can do it. And I know we have a lot more resources that are going to be chiming in during this presentation that'll help you as well. What you don't want, though, are any whiteouts or edits. You want to definitely use action words, and there's going to be some resources available for you so that you're using action words at the appendix. And so the reason why it's important to use action words is because, again, you want to be able to show what you can do. That's going to be important. So you don't want to have a redundant resume where everything says, I'm responsible for this, I'm responsible for this, I'm responsible for this. You want to have things like, I accomplished, I achieved. And you want to have those action words in there that really grab that employer to say, this person is a go-getter. This person is someone who will get things done. So you want to show what you can achieve. You want your resume to be clean and easy to read. You want to use professional font. You want to watch out for consistency and bullet points. So whatever you're doing at the beginning of that resume, you want to make sure that it's uniform all the way through. So if you're doing bullet points and you have a period at the end of one of those bullet points, you want to make sure you have a period at the end of every one of those bullet points. Or if you don't have any periods, that's fine. But you just want to be consistent all the way through. Another thing is we think about the way the world is today, and we are doing so much more social media. If you have a URL for LinkedIn, I encourage you to include that on your resume. And you can see at the top of the resume for Natalie Wells here that her URL for LinkedIn is there. If you don't have LinkedIn, I encourage you to look into that. It's a great networking tool, and it also is a way to put you out there in terms of social media in a safe and professional environment. Just a tip here as you're thinking about social media. If you have Facebook, make sure you're reviewing it to see if there's anything on there that a potential employer could look at and be turned off. You definitely want to make sure that you are representing yourself well. That's why LinkedIn is a great place to go. But again, I'm not saying get rid of Facebook, but we know some of the downfalls of Facebook as it's been in place for many years. Just make sure if you are looking to receive a job or looking for a job, that you are taking a look at your Facebook and making sure that it's putting you in the most positive light. Okay, so as we think about including education and technical skills, as we move further down into the resume, you want to keep the following in mind. Don't leave out your professional development, okay? That's going to be certainly important. So you don't want to leave that out, or any degrees that you have or any degrees that you're even pursuing. If you're pursuing a degree, you can actually put that as well so that employers know that you're interested in furthering your education. If you have patents or special achievements, those can be added as well. I got a great question the other day. Should I include military service? Absolutely. You can include military service. So employers are looking for veterans, which is a wonderful thing. So if you have that experience, that is another way for you to be recognized by employers. So certainly put that. If you are a person that holds a degree, you certainly want to put your degree there on the resume. And then if you do that, you don't have to put high school. So if you have a degree from a college or a university, you can omit your high school information. However, if you don't have a degree, you can certainly put your high school information. You don't need to put the year that you graduated. You don't want anyone to have to try to date you or try to see, you know, what year you were born and how old you are, anything like that. So you don't have to necessarily put a date if you're going to be putting your high school, but they would actually want to see whether or not you were able to graduate. So you can certainly put that high school there. And then any technical school. So if you've gone to a technical school and you want to put that, certainly put that on the resume as well. And so at the bottom of the screen, you see just a few examples there of how you would list your education. Okay. So as we wrap up the resume, you see at the bottom there, review, review, review. That is certainly going to be most important. And then when you think about your references, many times we've been used to putting references available upon request at the bottom of our resumes. You don't have to do that anymore. We are in the age of social media. So again, employers have a way to go out and actually check out things about us versus having to go and talk to an individual. However, some employers still do want to do that. And so if they do, they will ask you. So you certainly want to have references available. You want to have them listed. You want to have the telephone numbers and all of that somewhere separate than the resume. Cover letters. So we talked a little bit about cover letters earlier, and I mentioned how most employers are not asking for cover letters right now. However, some are, and if they do, you want to be prepared. Just know that cover letters are another way for employers to evaluate you. So again, just as your resume has to be very clear, it has to be very concise, and you don't want to have any typos or any issues with it, same thing with your cover letter. You want to pay just as much attention to that cover letter as you are that resume, because you don't want that cover letter to be the thing to knock your resume out of the running, okay? So again, definitely want to make sure that cover letter is on point. There are tools and resources that we'll talk about at the end that will help you with that as well. If you're applying internally, you can certainly email a hiring manager, and that will serve as a type of cover letter. Again, that's your first impression, so make sure it's a really, really good communication to that hiring manager. And again, review, review, review. Be sure you proofread and have others to give feedback. So find a friend, someone in human resources, a peer, someone that can take a look and be that second set of eyes for you. Okay, on to the foundation for the interview process. Now that you have been working hard on your resume, think about how you will articulate what you've done during an interview. Most hiring managers will ask you behavioral interview questions that will help predict your behavior based on how you have previously behaved in certain situations. Therefore, having detailed examples of what you've accomplished is extremely helpful. And so the reason why I want to make sure that you're aware of the behavioral questions is because there used to be a time when you would interview and you could say your philosophies, what you would do, how you think you would handle certain situations. That is not the case today. Employers will be asking you, what have you done in this situation? Not what you will do, but what have you done? So it's good to be able to write down specific instances where you have grown in a situation at work, where you've learned something new, where you made a mistake and you recovered from it, where you took a certain process or a program to the next level. You want to be able to write down specific examples of what you have done. And that's going to help you when you're ready to articulate it to an employer during the interview process. And so I always encourage people, make sure you're writing, because going through the process of actually writing down those experiences is going to help it to come back to your memory much better if you've gone through that process of actually writing it down. It's almost like, what you do during school when you're studying for a test. If you write down your study notes, they're probably going to come back to you a little bit quicker. So definitely write down those experiences. And of course, take a look at frequently asked questions. Those are easily found on the internet. Frequently asked questions during an interview. One that always comes up is, what have you experienced in terms of conflict management? Tell me about a time where you had a conflict with a coworker. What did you do? So I have different experiences like that written down. So they just come back to my memory during interviews really quickly. So that's what you want to do. You already know that that's a type of question they're going to ask. So definitely be prepared with examples like that. And because you have that resume already there, you know what those experiences are. Now you just need to write down some examples of what you've done. So again, anticipate the questions, prepare examples that highlight your transferable skills or competencies, know your resume and how it relates to the job description, as we talked about earlier, knowing those organizational needs, and consider practice or mock interviews. So again, if you have a peer or a relative or someone that can help you go through those frequently asked questions during an interview, just to get those nerves out and help you kind of think through how would you react during an interview. The more preparation, the better. And the thing that you have to keep in mind is that no one knows you better than you. You are an expert on you, okay? So all you're doing is highlighting the wonderful person that you are. So now what? What are your resources? What can you be doing? So some places that you can go in terms of helping you put together a resume. There's resume preparation sites as well as cover letter preparation sites that are listed here. So livecareer.com. There are some others, cover letter preparation sites that will actually help you so you don't have those typos or anything else like that. And the main thing to remember, again, as I said before, you can do this. You can do this, okay? So what I'm sharing with you today, this is nothing that I haven't done myself. I've done this for several years. It's been very helpful to me, even in terms of getting my role with Cummins. These are things that I have done myself in order to put myself out there and bring my resume to the top of that stack and be able to highlight what I have been able to achieve. And so some things to think about, again, action words for your resume. As I mentioned, there's several that you can use. And so those action words are there and available for you. So definitely take a look at ways to make sure that your resume is not redundant. And that is the end of the presentation for me. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you were able to grab some very, very helpful tools and resources that can help you as you think about preparing for your job interview in the virtual environment.
Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate that. Before I let you go here, we do have a couple of questions. We'll be getting to those after the end of our next presentation, so I'm hoping you stick around. And we do appreciate the very pointed and helpful information you provided. I want to reiterate, like you said, your resume is your personal billboard. That is such a great advice and a great way to look at it as we think about how to form our resume and what we need to include on these things. Erica, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Ms. Anna Pettenberg, Director of Operations for Spherion Staffing. And Spherion is a full-service staffing agency in our area that provides anything from temporary 1 to 2 day assignments on up to direct hire executive level positions. So it really runs the gamut here. Spherion is a leading recruiting and staffing organization serving the workforce needs of more than 3,000 businesses here and nationwide. So Anna, I want to thank you and welcome you into our webinar, and let's hear what you have to say. Thanks for being here today. Anna, we're not hearing you at the moment. I'm not sure if...
Forgot to hit unmute. Thank you
There
very
we
much.
go.
I unmuted myself on the computer, not on my phone. Anyway, thank you for the introduction, Mark. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm really excited to be here to go over some job seeker tips for the virtual space here in 2020. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see my presentation. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started off. We're going to talk a little bit about what Spherion is. I know Mark gave you a brief introduction there, but we're going to talk about Spherion, what we do, how to plan your career search, some tips for your interviewing and follow up after your interview. And then we've got a few jobs available too. So I want to go over a couple of those things. To start off about Spherion, as Mark said, we are a staffing company here in the Indianapolis area. We are a national company, so we do have different locations across the country, but our ultimate goal is to help drive careers, grow businesses, and better the communities we all call home. So for myself, I'm the Director of Operations. I've been in Spherion land for a little over 10 years at this point. I started off in our Fort Wayne organization and then grew to Indianapolis, and I've really come to love the Indianapolis area and a lot of the parts of the community that I'm allowed to grow into, and one of those obviously being a proud Hiring Hoosiers partner and an Indianapolis community member, so helping out with the different chambers across the Indianapolis area and a couple of different organizations. Our work, we're a local recruiting and staffing business, so we develop job and career opportunities for our local community members, and we want to, again, like I said, impact the places that we call home, whether that's by participating in things like this webinar, finding people jobs, finding our customers the best possible employees, and really just using our local presence to continue to build on our community and make it a better place every day. In terms of what we do, I said we're a staffing company. We do temp to perm, and direct hire placements. We service a few different industries, so manufacturing, logistics, call center, non-clinical healthcare, and professional roles. And as I said, we're rooted in Indianapolis, but we serve Indianapolis and all of the surrounding areas there too. So now we're going to go into these job seeker tips that we talked about. And as everybody knows, finding a new job can be really challenging and can sometimes be a frustrating experience. But you can make this a little bit easier on yourself if you use some proactive strategies for finding a new job, which is what we're going to cover today. So number one, we're going to start with just the basic understanding what you're looking for. So before starting your job search, you're going to want to take some time to reflect on what your strengths and weaknesses are and the type of work that you enjoy doing. As Erica said, you know yourself best. So the better you know yourself, the more likely you're going to find a new job that provides you with a greater sense of job satisfaction and just overall satisfaction in life. So finding out what you want in a job, and that kind of starts with what's most important to you. Everybody is motivated differently, and there's different things that can motivate you. Some people it's a title at a job. Some people it's the income or the potential to continue to grow their income. It could be promotion opportunities, the type of work itself, the location of the job. Maybe you get the ability to travel with the job. Company culture. So what's the mission or the vision and the values of a company, and are those most important to you? or even simple things as recognition or praise for a job well done. So recognizing those things will help you to kind of get a start on where you're going to go with your career search. So once you've identified that, you're going to go on to researching some companies. Once you determine that work that you like, it's time to find out what companies you're applying for want as well. So I would start with finding an industry that you like, or finding industries that you like. And then once you determine that, find a couple of companies within those industries. And then once you've created that list of industries, then you'll start your research. You can really start with looking at a company's website, getting a feel for what it is that they do, the different avenues of their business, and just reviewing the overall content of that company's website. Once you've done that, you can also check out a few things like their social media, Google reviews, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, a bunch of different places like that that can provide you a real outlook from several perspectives. So, you know, the companies, as I said, their mission, vision, and values, you can find that on their website. But then these other sites like Google or Glassdoor or LinkedIn can provide you insight as to what current or former employees of this company thought of the job or the particular company that you're going to work for. So that gives you a good basis to start off of, and then see what's really most important to you. And that could help you kind of adjust what you're looking for. So kind of going back to number one a little bit, just helping you to further understand what you're looking for in a job. And then once you get that list of companies, you've been able to do your research on them, you'll rank those companies. Figure out, okay, this is my number one goal, and these are my next couple goals. So then that way you can kind of prioritize your time or your job search on what's most important to you and what you feel is the best fit for you. The next part kind of ties into exactly what Erica was talking about and giving you all the tips on writing a resume. So your resume it's one of the most critical tools of your job search, as Erica said. You want to make yourself an obvious fit for that position. So studying the words and the phrases that are used in the job description and making sure that you are using some of those keywords or those buzzwords that Erica was talking about to make sure you're tailoring your resume to each job, and making sure that once that you submit your resume over to that particular position, the hiring manager or the recruiter can take a look at it, and right off the bat they can say, this person has what we're looking for. So I don't want to go too much into that because I know that Erica covered a good chunk of that for you, and she provided a lot of helpful insights to that. So I'm going to focus more on this section here. So when you're getting your job search started, we know that there are so many different places that are hiring virtually right now. And it may seem like every time you send off your application, it seems like it's kind of going into a big cloud in the sky. There's so many different people applying to those, and it's fairly easy to apply to a job right now. It's just a matter of uploading your resume, submitting it, and then you're not sure where it goes. So getting organized and making sure that you're creating the best sense of organization for you to make sure you're able to follow up on the jobs you've applied for is going to be the most helpful. So before you start applying for those jobs or interviewing with those employers, you'll want to take a moment to develop what system that is that works for you in organizing your job search. For me, in my opinion, I've taken a look at it, and I've done the same thing as Erica. Every time that I've changed jobs or I have wanted to grow within my organization, I take a look, I create a spreadsheet to keep track of everything that I do. For me, what I include is the list or the company name, the position I'm applying for, the date that I applied, and if I get an interview, what date and time that interview is. And then I also create a folder. So as I said, we can tailor our resume to each job. So you'll want to make sure you keep track of which resume you did submit and what position you applied for and the job description that is relevant to that position. This will allow you to make sure that you are keeping track of what steps you've done for each job that you've applied for. And then from there, it will allow you to create the appropriate follow-up steps once you either have interviewed or once you've applied, so you know the right timing to be able to follow up with a hiring manager. Next step we'll want you to use your network. We talked about using LinkedIn in Erica's presentation and a little bit earlier in mine. But don't be afraid to connect with your friends, your family, mentors, coworkers, current coworkers, maybe somebody who's in an industry that you're looking to get into. Don't be afraid to make those connections, because the more connections that you have, the better your chances are of getting that position that you like or that you would like. It also will help you to get a really good idea of what's out there. There may be positions that you never knew existed, but might be right in your wheelhouse of what you're looking to do. So really making those connections and understanding what you don't know is going to be key to continuing your job search. In terms of LinkedIn too, regardless of which, what type of industry you're going into, having this LinkedIn profile or being able to connect with people on LinkedIn will be helpful in your job search, because you can talk to those people, you can talk to people of multiple different layers of the company. So maybe you're looking to get into a very entry-level position. You can start at that entry-level person and kind of work your way up and get to introduce yourself to some of the key players of that organization. So don't hesitate to do that. One of the things that's important there too is, if you get to connect with people, or somebody that works at a particular company that you're wanting to go to, hiring managers, in my opinion, would always prefer to interview somebody that came from somebody that they know already. So the recommendations or referrals go a long way. And I know that there are plenty of companies that do also provide referral incentives to employees. So utilize those. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about a position, get to know somebody that's there. If you don't know somebody in your immediate circle, find out somebody who might. So go to your immediate circle and say, hey, do you know somebody who works at XYZ company? And see if they can help you make a connection. Next step we want to go over is setting daily goals. So I always think, in my opinion, that finding a full-time job is a full-time job itself. So it's not going to happen overnight. Let's do the things every day that are going to lead us to that. So set daily goals for yourself. So refer back to the spreadsheet you created. Find out which positions you've applied for that you haven't heard anything back on. Follow up with those hiring managers, or find somebody within that organization that might be able to help point you in the right direction to see where you stand in that application process. Don't get discouraged. If let's say you send out 10 applications and you haven't heard anything back, don't get discouraged. Like I said, there's so many open jobs right now, and all these hiring managers and recruiters they're going through a lot of resumes and a lot of applications right now. Sometimes that additional follow-up step it's exactly what that hiring manager needs to say, this person is being really proactive. They really care about this position. They want this position. And what I've seen is I tend to go back to that person who follows up with me the most first, because I know that they are actively looking to be employed through my company. Second of all, be kind to yourself. If you're having a challenging day with, you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, or maybe the position you really, really wanted, you got a letter back saying that they were going to move in a different direction at this time. Don't beat yourself up over that. There are going to be plenty of opportunities, and you're going to find that right position for you if you keep plugging away every day and adding a new step every day, or finding a new company every day that you're going to try to apply for or work towards employment at that particular company. Next is to create a good support network. We talked about your network in terms of your friends, family, and community, but those people who you feel like you really can rely on, or you can talk to when you're having, a great day. Maybe you're celebrating the fact that you were selected to go on to an interview, or maybe you've had the opposite. Maybe you've had a challenging day where you got a couple of rejection notices. Find somebody who you can really confide in and talk through those things with. And throwing this out there, I'm more than happy to be that person for anybody. I know that I work with a multitude of different employees, different employers within the community, and sometimes you just need a little extra boost from somebody. Next up, you're going to want to set the number of goals, or set goals on the number of applications that you submit each day. So, if you're really trying to if you don't want to wait a long period of time to get into a new position, set that goal a little bit higher. So maybe you're submitting 5 or 6, 7, 8 applications a day. If you're just maybe passively looking, maybe that number is lower, but it's still going to take work to get to that true goal, that new position that you're looking for. And then, as I was speaking about earlier, make sure that you're following up on your application. So if it's been a couple of days since you've heard anything or since you've submitted your application, always follow up, or find an HR manager or a coordinator that you're able to follow up with. So then that way they know that you're still serious, you're still interested in the position. And like I said, that always puts that person up at the top of the list for me, because I know that they are truly interested in working for my organization. Number 7, be memorable. And I want to tie this back to what Erica said, making sure that you have the kind of stories behind your previous experience. You want to be memorable in the fact that you can talk about your experience and almost tell a story about your experience. So people remember stories, so you want to make sure that you have a set of interview stories or answers that you can use in job interviews that will demonstrate your skills or your achievement or just your passion for the work overall. So Erica hit a little bit on the behavioral-based questions, maybe where they ask about conflict management. So have a story or have that behavioral-based question planned out ahead of time. So I can tell, like when I'm interviewing somebody and I ask one of those questions, I can usually tell if somebody is trying to just come up with something on the spot or if they've prepared in advance for that. And they were kind of able to anticipate those questions. And those ones that took the time to think about these ahead of time, so then that way they can truly demonstrate their ability to get through that conflict. So, they can tell me what happened, what actions they took, and then what the outcome of that action was. It shows me that they're prepared. It shows me that they understand that it takes some planning to make sure we get these issues resolved. But it just sticks out in my brain because it's something that it's a story. I remember. It's not just I thought of this on the spot. I think this is what they're looking for. I want you to know what I'm looking for before you get to that interview. So make sure that take a look at common interview questions like, tell me about a time where you had a challenging customer service interaction, or maybe tell me how you were able to help out the company culture or grow the company culture. Things like those, like the basic interview questions, prepare ahead of time. Have a story for those. And let's make sure that you have something planned in advance of your interview, because that will make you stand out, and it will make the interview seem more conversational versus transactional. Number 8 is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. So, before you we want to talk about interviewing tips and really what needs to happen before you get to that interview. So before you get called for your first interview, we want to, as I said, develop responses for common interview questions, but then practice them or use those mock interviews with friends or with your mentors or coworkers or whatever you need to do there. So the more prepared you are for that interview, the more comfortable you're going to feel in that interview. And like I said, it'll just become a conversation with somebody. So you want to plan ahead, and you'll want to make sure you communicate proactively. So I would make sure that before you go into your interview, make sure you understand what the appropriate dress is. Are you business casual? Are you business professional? Do you need to bring a copy of your resume, a copy of your cover letter, copies of samples of your work or anything like that? Make sure that you know that information up front. And if you don't know the information up front, I would make sure you bring an extra copy, and it's better to overdress, in my opinion, than to underdress. We talked about preparing with commonly asked interview questions, but then during the interview, make sure that you're engaged. And one of the important things that I've seen in this industry and staffing industry is if I can have a true just conversation with somebody, if I can get to know you by having a conversation with you versus just going through each one of your bullet points on your resume and saying, tell me about this, tell me about that. I can read all of that information, and that's why I got you here in the first place. I want to dig a little bit deeper, and I want to understand you as an employee, as a person, and what's going to work for you, what's going to work for me. So make sure that you're going through those things. And another point that Erica made is that just as much as your resume needs to be engaging and kind of draw somebody in, your interview does too. The more you can conversate with somebody or you can be engaged, the more memorable you will be, like I said in number 7. So keep those things in mind, and then make sure that you don't forget to pitch yourself. You're essentially telling this employer in your interview what makes them the best fit, what makes you the best fit for this position. So be kind to yourself, and this is an opportunity for you to kind of almost brag on yourself a little bit. Share your accomplishments and show why you are a better fit for that position than any other candidate that's applied. Once that interview is complete, send a thank you note to that interviewer. Obviously, in the time frame that we're in right now, I've seen plenty of electronic email thank you letters, but in person doesn't, or not in person, but sending them through the mail doesn't hurt either. So either one is fine with me, but just knowing that you're thanking that person for taking the time to get to know you in the first place shows that you're interested, shows that you care about that person and the time that they spent getting to know you, and that you're really interested in the position itself. And then after that interview, make sure that you're following up with those hiring managers regularly. It shows that you're enthusiastic, it shows you're still interested in the position, and it also shows that you're ready to make that move. So whenever they're ready, you're ready. Your work isn't really done there. You know, like I said, the following up part is really important, but the key to doing the follow-ups is to make sure you're doing it in a professional manner and not just emailing them every day saying, do you have an update? Do you have an update? Do you have an update? If you're going to have those communications with those hiring managers, make sure they are meaningful, they show that you care, they show that you are interested, but that it's to the point. So clear, concise, to the point, follow-up every so often. And some final thoughts really on finding that new job. You know, it's different right now. We all know that. Everybody's applying to things virtually. Interviews are taking place virtually. So even though you're doing a lot more work on the back end, it's so important to continue to have a positive attitude and a positive outlook. Employers, they can certainly sense some of that desperation and despair, and we understand it. You know, right now it's a challenging time for everybody, and some of those folks who are, you know, maybe they were laid off because of COVID and they're looking for new work. It's hard because there are a lot of people in that scenario right now. So keep a positive outlook on it, and then make sure that you get the help and the resources that you need. If you feel like maybe you're getting passed over for opportunities, a company like Spirion or maybe even a resume writing class can help you with taking a look at your resume or assessing your experience to show you maybe some helpful tips or tricks to get to that next level or to continue to move forward in your job search and maybe not be overlooked. Another thing to remember is just you may not have the full experience of what somebody's looking for, but making sure that you're open-minded to receiving some additional training or experience, especially if you're entering a new industry, like a lot of folks are right now. So recognize with the hiring manager that you know that you maybe don't have the exact experience that they're looking for, but reiterating the fact that you're willing to learn, willing to grow, or take additional steps to gain employment with that company in that particular position really goes a long way. And then lastly, some things that you may be able to consider too, or just even if you need to come find a place like Spirion or a staffing company where you can get some work experience in the meantime while you're continuing to look for your next employment, or maybe even doing some volunteering, that can help you build networks that you maybe didn't know that were there in the past. So, you know, coming to a place like Spirion, you have the connections of the recruiters that you're working with to get you that position, but we also have access to several different industries, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, that we have connections, whether that's team leads, supervisors, HR managers, CEOs. We have a whole different gamut of connections with people, And if we find the right person, maybe that's coming to work for us just in a temporary role, but we think, you know what, this person would be excellent at this position. It just kind of opens up the doors for you to continue to learn more and more about yourself, about different companies, and broaden your network. As I said, you know, we want to make sure that your attitude and your outlook on your job search is important too. It's just as important really as the technical skills that you're building. So if you're going into a call center type role, having prior call center work is important. Or if you're an engineer going into a new engineering role, obviously having prior experience is important, but the soft skills are just as important as those technical skills. So we talked about your attitude, but your communication, how dependable you are, how well you work with a team, how well you're able to adapt to change, you manage your time, you pay attention to the details, or just how you interact with leadership in general. All of those things are just as important as the technical skills you need to go into a new position. Lastly, make sure that you are, you know, even if you're, let's say that you've been in a manufacturing role, a very entry-level manufacturing role, but you've kind of seen where you can grow with a manufacturing company, don't be afraid to dream those big careers. So maybe you're starting off in that very entry-level position, but the soft skills, the technical skills that we've talked about, the more you can continue to learn and grow those types of things, the better off that you're going to be in your career search or being able to elevate your career throughout that company that you're working for. You're going to want to challenge yourself to get to those positions, but you don't have to overdo it. Just learn a few things every week or every month. Set a couple goals for yourself to get there. And just keep learning, volunteering, learning, you know, being willing to help out other team members or, you know, learn a new task on the job that you currently have. Keeping all of those things open-minded is extremely helpful for you continuing to grow. Lastly, I know we talked about you know, a couple different industries here, but as a Hiring Hoosiers partner, you know, we obviously want to make sure that we're able to help anybody that's on this webinar and beyond. And I just wanted to list out here, we do have a few open positions. So if you're interested in those, we'd be happy to help. But otherwise, we really hope that you enjoy your time at the Employment Opportunities Fair tomorrow. And I wish every single one of you the best of luck in your career search. And I hope that between Erica and I's presentations today that you've learned quite a bit that might be able to help you elevate yourself in your current career or help you in finding a new position. So with that, that's the end of my presentation there. I'm really glad to be here again today, and if I can ever be of any help to anybody, I would certainly love to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. We appreciate Spherion being a WRTV Hiring Hoosiers partner along with Indiana Black Expo. Thank you for your insight into how to get noticed and how to really make a difference and stand out and be considered. This is the Q&A part of our presentation for today. And so I want to remind all of our attendees to this webinar today that you can click on the Q&A if you've got a question, and I'm going to go through some of those, and Erica and Anna will stay with me and answer some of your questions that you might have there about building a resume, about being ready for the interview, especially in this time of doing many, many things virtually, including landing your next job. So let me start here. This goes back to something you had mentioned earlier in your presentation, Erica, and this is how do you find those keywords from an organization to ensure your resume gets a hit? So people want to use, you know, there's not a lot of room on one page, so you want to make sure every word you're picking is the right word.
Yeah, so there is a way, Mark, for you to be able to do that. I talked a little bit about the language of an organization. And the way for you to get some insight on that organization's language is to take a look at their website. If you take a look at the company's website, you also take a look at the job description itself. That's where you're going to find those keywords. And so when you are looking at an organization, just as Anna talked about, you know, thinking about those employers that you're interested in, make sure that you take a look at their website and see what their core values are. see what their mission is, what their vision is. And so you're going to see those key words in those types of communications that they have that are open to the public. And especially on that job description, that's where you're going to see the way that they write down what their organizational needs are. So if you're reviewing the job descriptions that are out there that are available to you with that employer, and also taking a look at the website, looking at their mission, vision, and values, that's really going to give you some insight into what their language is, and will definitely give you some insight into what those keywords most likely will be.
In essence, they're telling you what to say.
They're telling you, they're giving you the cheat sheet, so definitely use them.
Okay, our next question here. Anna, for you, you were talking about hiring managers. This question, it reads from Daisy. Hey, Daisy, good to have you here with us. How do you contact hiring managers if you're not already working in that organization? We need you to unmute your mic again. I know it.
I'm horrible about that. I'm sorry. I would say that there's a couple different ways to start off with that. So when you're looking at the job description that's posted or that you're getting ready to apply to, I would check there first and see if there's a hiring manager listed, or if there may be a general email box that you may be able to email to get an update or to inquire about the status of your application there. Besides that, I would look up, I would use that LinkedIn network. I would check out LinkedIn and see if there are HR managers listed for the company that you're looking to start working for, and I would contact them. You can send them a message and see if you can get a follow-up from them there. If not, I would recommend just calling into the company and asking if you can speak to their HR department to follow up on your application. I think you're the one that's muted now, Mark.
Right. A little karma there, right? Erica, this one's for you. This goes back to the simple resume. Are bullet points better than paragraphs for work experience descriptions?
Yeah, so I am a big fan of bullet points. One thing that you can do, you can certainly follow up with a resource like Anna to give you some insight into kind of what the industry standards are in terms of resumes, and then also looking at the resume builder websites to kind of see what some of the suggestions are there. Bullet points tend to be easier to read, so I certainly do suggest that people use bullet points because it's a quick way for employers just to be able to read the information versus having to skim through a paragraph to look for what they're looking for. So bullet points are certainly encouraged when you even look at the different websites and resources that are out there. Paragraphs tend to run together. So again, if you just think about that employer or hiring manager, think about their experience. And if there's a quick and easier way for them to be able to see your skills and experience, definitely go with that.
We have more questions coming in here by the minute, and we like that. We want our attendees to continue asking questions here, and I'll move on to the next one just to save time. And either one of you can jump in on this one or together, but what interview tips do you have for a virtual interview? There's a different kind of energy when you're doing it over the screen versus sitting across from a desk from someone. So what tips would you have for someone who has to do the interview process virtually?
Sure, I can start with that one. I think number one, make sure that your technology is set up correctly. I think that you can run into some hiccups there. So like me, make sure that you know how to mute, unmute, make sure you know how to use your video. If you haven't done a virtual interview before, maybe see if you can practice with a friend. So then that way you can get a little bit of experience with it ahead of time. Outside of that, I think that making sure that you're keeping track of you're able to stay engaged. So it's different because, you know, you can only see shoulders up really in a video interview. So being able to determine somebody's body language is a little bit different, and making sure that you know how to answer those questions appropriately. So I think being able to adjust to that and understand how the body language is different and being able to continue that conversation is really important.
Yeah, I certainly agree with Anna on that as well, Mark. And, you know, one of the things that was helpful, even in preparing for today, you know, it's interesting that, you know, you have to bring a different energy when you are on video. So definitely stepping it up, not going overboard, but make sure that you do let the employer know that you're interested in being there with that energy that you have.
This next question, I think, applies to a lot of people who are coming out of college. And I know that when I was just coming out of college, I had this very question too. And this one is, how do recent graduates use their classroom experience to add to work experience on their resume? So those graduates that are just getting into the world, just wanting to get that opportunity to build their resume, how do they use their schooling to apply to it?
I think that in that instance, what I've seen is adding some of the relevant classes that you've taken to the position that you're looking to apply to. So if you are, let's say you're a communications major, but you're looking to go into maybe like an HR related field. Did you take a class that's relevant to HR? Did you have to learn about employment law? Did you have to do interviewing tips or public speaking? Things like those help me to bring those up in an interview and ask a few more questions about those, whether it's, tell me about some of the public speaking you had to do. What did you do well with it? What challenges did you see with it? And how did you overcome those challenges? So kind of like the behavioral based questions that we talked about a little bit. But those are important to me too. I want to see what classes you took, what projects maybe you had to work on that were relevant to what you're looking to do, and being relatable and being able to relate the experience in the classroom to the work that you would be doing is important.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of Anna, with that, she talked about people skills or soft skills as well. And so in a college setting, you do have an opportunity to do that. If you're leading or participating in any organizations, you can certainly list that as experience where you've organized or you've led events, anything like that that will showcase some of those skills that you can certainly use in any job setting. I would encourage you to do that as well.
Great answers there, and hopefully that helps some of our recent graduates who may be taking part in this today. Earlier we talked about being honest, maintaining your honesty through this. So this next question hits on that, and this is, what is the best answer for why do you want to leave your current employer when you're just not happy there? And then a second part of this question is, if you do have an interview, what do you tell your current employer?
I can take that one too. I think that being honest with the person you are interviewing with about why you want to leave your company is important to me, because if you're, let's say, for example, the reason that you're wanting to leave the company that you're with is because you don't like the culture there, there's a way to say that where it's indicative of what you're experiencing there and what you're hoping to get out of a future employer. So if you tell me that the leadership maybe isn't trained properly, so it makes the rest of the dominoes, like the workers that are doing kind of the frontline work, if it makes their lives more challenging, then that's something I need to be able to hit on in my interview with them, or what I need to explain to them on how we are different, or maybe how we operate similarly. So in that way we can identify if it's a good fit for both of us, for the candidate and for the employer. You want to hit on anything there, Erica? Am I missing anything?
Yeah. Just to kind of piggyback off of what you mentioned too, Anna. When I think about that question, and it does come up quite a bit, what do I say? You can always put a positive spin on the experience. So the main thing is, if it is a conflict, or the reason why you left is because the culture is different from what you expected, or it's harder for you to be able to navigate in that particular culture, definitely make sure that you bring a positive spin to that reasoning. So if you were to say, it's just a different work environment for me, but the way that I was able to overcome was that I did X, Y, and Z. So always think of some type of way that you overcame that situation. You don't want to be overly negative, or negative really at all, about your past employer, because you don't want to burn bridges. You don't want to make it seem like you're going to bring that same type of negative attitude to that new organization. You want to make sure that if it truly was something that was a challenge, that you spin it that way. It was challenging for me, and I would like a new opportunity at this time, and I think I have skills and experiences that I can bring to this new organization. So always put a positive spin on it. Don't be negative. because an employer will definitely pick up on that, and they don't want you to bring that negativity into their organization.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice there. Erica, I'll stay with you here on this one. Is it okay to have gaps in your resume?
Yes, there are times when you may have gaps in your resume. My advice to anyone that does have those gaps in your resume, let's say that we have, mothers that are now going back into the workforce, and they have to be able to put it on their resume. It's been a few years since they've been in the workforce. As long as you can clearly articulate your reason for having that gap, that's what's most important. So I certainly would encourage you to make sure that you have that information available up front. So if you know that you were, for myself, I'm in a military family, so I do have some of those gaps in my resume. The other reason for gaps would be if you are applying for a certain role, you want to make sure it's the relevant experience. And so if I worked at the grocery store in between jobs, I may not have that job listed. And so I have to be able to articulate during an interview, that's my reason for that gap. And that makes sense because I was still doing some job searching. So you just have to be able to explain that. Even if you were, moving from state to state, what's the reason for that? So clearly have those answers up front.
I have another question from Terry, who asked the last question here. This is more about your nerves. So if you're nervous going into an interview, how do you prepare for that? How do you get a handle on calming yourself before this very important interaction with someone who could seal your fate?
Yeah. So I think it kind of hits on a couple of things we talked about in the presentation, just making sure that you are prepared. So know what position you applied for, do your research on the company, and practice. Those mock interviews, I know Erica touched on them, I touched on them. Those are so helpful because you're able to, whether it's a mock interview through a company that's holding them, or maybe you just do one with a friend or a mentor, the more practice you get answering some of those common interview questions, the more you're going to put your mind at ease, and the more that when you go into that interview, you're confident that you know how you're going to answer those common questions. Obviously, you're not going to be able to anticipate every single question that's going to be asked, but the more prepared you are ahead of time, or the more practice you have, the better off your nerves are going to be, and it will help you to feel and appear more confident in your interview.
As HR professionals, have you two ever had to calm a prospective candidate?
Yes, I have before. I actually had a gentleman that interviewed, and he was sweating profusely. I mean, very, very articulate and just a great candidate. However, he just sweat so profusely, we had to help him and just kind of, pat him down and say, it's okay, it's okay. And so it was just obvious that those jitters and nerves had not been worked out. He had not practiced, as Anna talked about. And so it is very obvious to an employer if you haven't prepared. We can tell as HR professionals, we pick up on it very, very quickly. So please do your homework.
Our next question from one of our attendees, is there a time limit on how far back your experience occurred that should be on your resume?
I'll let you answer that, Anna.
Yeah, I think it depends on the position. If you're going into, as we talked about, maybe an engineering role or maybe a professional level role, you want to share your relevant experience. But in my experience, there's not necessarily a certain time frame that I'm looking for. I'm looking more so for the experience itself. Are you qualified for the job? Not necessarily the time frames. And as Erica said earlier about, the timing of all your jobs, the timing is important to know really how much experience you have. But just be honest in your experience. The more honest you are in your experience, the better off the conversation with the interviewer is, and the better chance you have of getting that position. So generally what we see is maybe at least the last 7 to 10 years of experience, unless it's something that's more specialized that we need to understand, all of the training and everything that's led up to the position that you're in currently. And correct me if you think anything different, Erica.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to mention too, the 7 to 10 year mark. And the only reason why I would, say to go outside of that really is if you want to show some type of career progression. So for instance, if you are a person that you started as an entry-level person, and then when you left that company, you were an operations manager by the time you left. Being able to show that progression, even though that may have happened 15 years ago, it does speak to the type of employee that you are. So if you have those types of experiences that show your progression, where you were promoted through the company and really grew with that company, I think that's a great thing to keep on your resume, regardless of the years.
Let me ask you guys one more here. This question, once I upload my resume, who's the first to view it? This looks more at I guess, gatekeepers along the way.
Sure. I think that depends really on where you're applying. You know, if it's somewhere like Furrion, for example, I have a whole team of recruiters. So I've got about 20 recruiters here in the Indianapolis area that any one of them really could get it first. It's just, and they're all responsible for sourcing and recruiting for the same positions. But it may be different, like if you were looking at a direct hire position with a company, they may have the hiring manager who's looking to oversee this person review that as well. So it depends on where you're going. But I think that just using the tips that you've learned for both Erica and myself and applying them to your resume or to your interview in general is important in making sure that that first impression of the resume gets you through to that next step.
I think you're on mute, Mark. No, just like I said, Mark, before, that no one knows you better than you, and preparing is so important. As both Anna and I have talked so much about, make sure that you invest in yourself. This is for you.
Good advice there. We heard a lot of great tips throughout your two presentations. So I want to thank you both, Anna and Erica, for participating in this afternoon's session. It was very helpful. Indiana Black Expo will continue to offer valuable webinars hosted by experts for the rest of the year to help you during this pandemic. We really are banding together to help in any way possible. So we want you to know this session today will be available for replay if you want to watch it again, if you missed any kind of important sections or just want to review what was talked about today. It'll be available for you to see on the IBE website and also at WRTV.com. We'll also post it at hiringhoosiers.com so that you can go back and jot down tips you might have missed. You can visit IndianaBlackExpo.com for additional information and resources. This concludes our webinar for today. So we appreciate everyone who attended. And again, I want to thank Anna Pettenberg with Furrion and Erica Johnson with Cummins Inc. for your valuable insight today.